Welcome you inside this midweek edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Rick Pizzo, Michael Huff, which can mean only one thing. We are talking hardball. We are a month away from the Big Ten baseball tournament, and we have seen the instant impact of the West Coast on the entire league and what appears to be breaking down to be a three-team race in the regular season title.
Yeah, two of those three we kind of expected in UCLA and Oregon. One of them, Iowa. Rick Heller always finding a way. The arms are hitting the strike zone a bunch, sitting at the top. But like you said, three teams right now that look pretty solid: Iowa, UCLA, Oregon.
USC still in the mix as well. As we look at the top five in the Big Ten baseball standings currently, it is our big story. See, the Trojans and Huskies are tied at 11-7. That's a fourth place tie, but they're both 3 games behind Oregon in the win column. UCLA percentage points ahead of Oregon, just played an important series this past week, and you see Iowa already with 17 Big Ten wins, and we are only in late April. It's been an unbelievable season so far for the Hawkeyes. We'll get to Iowa in just a bit, but I do want to start with those West Coast teams because we see 4 of the top 5, the new arrivals. How would you measure kind of the impact of what those programs have meant to the Big Ten, not just in this race, but also when it comes to RPI and potential NCAA at-large bids?
Well, you think about the 4 programs that came in, the Washington, the Oregons, USCs, UCLAs, and immediately you think about quality of opponent. You immediately think about strength of schedule. You think about the history with these franchises, these universities. USC, the most national championships in college baseball history. UCLA, you think about the home of Jackie Robinson Stadium, so beautiful. Oregon, all that they have done, especially these last couple years, winning their region, going to a super region, just barely getting knocked out from going to the College World Series. So immediately you have brought in 4 programs that are going to elevate the quality of the games, which, just like you said, is going to elevate your RPI. Right now, the top 3 RPI for the Big Ten, just what we talked about: Oregon, USC, UCLA. That is going to help everybody else within the conference, and it's going to raise that bar where I think we're going to get back to 4, maybe 5 teams in the NCAA tournament.
It potentially helps a team like Iowa that is not as highly regarded in the RPI as it is inside the Big Ten standings. I mentioned 17 wins already for the Hawkeyes. So let's look now at what awaits Rick Heller and his team. They have a couple of non-conference games as they play those midweek non-conference games throughout the rest of the year. But you start to look at their series in league play. You have Indiana, you have a road trip to Washington, you have Oregon, and oh, by the way, there's a non-conference series against Oregon State, one of the top 5 teams in the entire country. So when you start to think about Iowa, Huffer, they have a nice lead in the standings in terms of total wins. They also play a really difficult schedule. You even take Indiana this weekend. They'll be favored in that series, but that's tough against Devin Taylor and a team that can get hot at the right time. This will not be an easy trek the rest of the way if Iowa's going to hold on to its first-place lead.
Well, what's really nice is you only have 3 weekends, not 4. So as you were showing those top 5 rankings right now, I'm looking at the losses with 4 series left. They're 3 ahead of everybody, 1 ahead of UCLA. But with only 3 series, really for Rick Heller, I want to get that mindset, if I'm Rick Heller, of saying, okay, I have a chance now to find that 4th, that 5th starter, something I'm going to need not only in the Big Ten tournament, but when we get to the NCAA tournament. And when I put up against an Oregon State as one of those non-conference weekends, they're ranked 3rd in the nation right now. So for Rick Heller, also thinking that my RPI is definitely going to go up, even if I only take 1 and lose 2 over that weekend.
And then when you say only 3 series left, you mean only 3 conference series, because of course they do have that weekend series against the Beavers, and that's a great point. It's not just wins and losses. It's who you play, where you play them, and when you play them. If Oregon State's still ranked number 3 when Iowa plays the Beavers, there's really, unless you get swept and look really bad, there's no huge downside because it's going to help your RPI in pretty much any situation. Let's get to UCLA's remaining schedule. They have Penn State, USC, Illinois, and Northwestern. The USC and Illinois series are road series, though not necessarily a long trip when you're playing against the Trojans across town. You look at the 4 series that they have left, and I know that USC's been really good. I know that Penn State offensively has been really good, but this is a fairly favorable closing stretch for UCLA.
Very much so. And again, as we talked about with Rick Keller, for John Savage, he's really found 4 pretty solid arms. When you think about Wyland Moss, Ian May, Landon Stump, Michael Barnett. But as we've talked about, getting into the Big Ten tournament, you're going to be playing 5, maybe 6, 7 games. You need more than just 3 or 4. You need more than just your weekend guys that you can go to. And this is going to help him, especially the way that he's going to be ending the season, knowing you're going to be more than likely a top 20 ranked team, knowing that you're going to be going to the tournament. You really have that opportunity to start to build a rotation that gets you 4 or 5 deep, gets you 4 or 5 starters, 6 starters that you feel comfortable going 3, 4, 5 innings. And you think about their great sophomores in Rock Chalowski, Mulavai Levu, those 2 guys are going to carry this ball club with their bats that they have done all year. So they're looking, just like you said, very favorable going into this last part of the year.
Chalowski probably the Big Ten's best pro prospect right now. He is on everybody's board as one of the kind of can't-miss prospects in all of college baseball. And I think John Savage, right now, he and Rick Heller probably the leaders in the race for Big Ten Coach of the Year. If that vote was taken today, it is not. There is still work to be done, and we will see those awards come out on the Monday before the Big Ten tournament starts. So let's get to Oregon now. They have Oregon State this week, and the Beavers making their Big Ten rounds here in late April and early May. Their Big Ten series are at Michigan State, home against Washington, and how about that finish at Iowa? What a terrific finishing weekend for both the Ducks and the Hawkeyes in the regular season. What do you take away from this Oregon schedule? Again, a team here, Michael, that has a great chance this weekend to really back up its RPI, which is already pretty solid.
Right. And as we've talked about, unfortunately, pitching. Right now, we love Oregon's hitting. Iowa leading the Big Ten in overall average, but Oregon with 5 guys, 10-plus home runs. And they're 3rd in the Big Ten overall batting average, but this is a lineup that puts the fear of God in everybody they play. So for the Oregon Ducks and Mark Wasikowski, I really like, again, the fact that you're going to be ending with an ability to start to meld a rotation, trying to find that 3rd, 4th, 5th guy that can go 5 innings as you get into the Big Ten tournament. And it's going to be very interesting for both of these teams. If they almost have their spots locked up going into the tournament, to see what they do with their starters. Do they only throw their starters 4 innings, knowing that you're going to try to get them to pitch twice in the Big Ten tournament? Do you maybe move some other people around? So for Mark Wasikowski, ideally set up that you're going to be able to challenge yourself with the Oregon State this coming weekend, and then you're going to have a couple series that you should feel pretty comfortable. If your hitters just keep hitting the way they are, you're going to win the series, if not maybe sweep. But that last series against Iowa, I think Iowa for Rick Heller is going to be great for that RPI, making sure that he is on everyone's radar, no questions, maybe getting into a national ranking. But to let these 2 coaches kind of battle strategically to see how are we going to set things up for the tournament.
You bring up a really fascinating point with the RPI for all of these NCAA hopeful teams heading in to Big Ten tournament week. How do you set up the rotation? Are you saving yourself for the NCAAs? And don't forget, there's a new look tournament. The double elimination format is gone. We're down to 12 teams. 5 don't even make it. There are no more if necessary games. We know when they are going to be played. It's a little bit more linear, a little bit easier to understand, but we don't know how the coaches will approach it. If they feel like they're already in the NCAA tournament field, we shall see for the first time in 2025. All right, our focus turn. Gatorade Game Leaders shows you that nearly 20 Big Ten players are among the top 50 NFL draft prospects, according to FoxSports.com draft analyst Rob Rang. That list highlighted by 5 Big Ten players inside the top 9, including a pair of former Penn State stars in Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren, plus 3 Michigan men in Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, and Will Johnson. Welcome Rob Rang into the fold now as the draft quickly approaches Thursday night. We get started. So Rob, let's start toward the top of your list. How do Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren project at the next level in comparison to where and how they played in State College?
Well, I think very well. I think that they are two of the absolute blue chip players in this draft class, and Abdul Carter in particular, just his burst and bend off of the edge. Of course, he is at one point was an off-ball linebacker for Penn State. I expect him to be primarily rushing the quarterback in the NFL. I think that he is a top five cinch. Then with Tyler Warren, I might be a little bit higher on him than some are. I'm not necessarily anticipating that Tyler Warren is going to be a top three selection in the NFL. But I do, however, believe that this is a future all pro candidate that we're talking about, and is very much going to justify his selection within the top 15.
Do you think, Rob, the success and the impact of tight ends, especially over the last couple of years, whether you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs and the play of Travis Kelce or other guys, could help Warren when it comes to where he'll actually come off the board?
I absolutely believe that to be the case. Not only Travis Kelce, but guys like George Kittle or Sam Laporta, was a former Big Ten superstar. For Tyler Warren, I just view him as a guy that reminds me a little bit of Rob Gronkowski, to be honest with you. And it's heady stuff. We're talking about Hall of Fame players, but just with his size, his ability to impact the game as a blocker, and certainly his receiving ability. And again, the size, the soft hands, the body control. He can be a true seam threat as well as on the perimeter in the NFL, and that is just very rare kind of position.
As for Carter, I've been kind of dialed in on the now former Penn State star. I'm a lifelong Giants fan. A lot of conversation about the Giants with that third pick going there, even though they don't necessarily need rush end help right now as much as they need other positional help. Where do you anticipate Carter landing?
I do think that there's a possibility, a strong possibility, the New York Giants at number 3 overall. I have a hard time imagining any scenario in which Abdul Carter is not the selection at number 4 overall to the New England Patriots, should the Giants elect to go in a different position.
All right, let's move on to the 3 Michigan players that you have inside the top 10. And those 3 guys, as I mentioned, are Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, and Will Johnson. Let's start with Graham. Just a monster. Production seems to check every single box. Where does he project to be chosen?
Well, I think that there's a possibility that he goes as early as, say, the top 4, top 5. Again, the New England Patriots are number 4 overall. He looks like one of those players that kind of plays the Patriots way. I think that Mike Vrabel will feel that way. The Jacksonville Jaguars, number 5, would make a lot of sense. Las Vegas Raiders at number 6. In my final mock draft at FoxSports.com, I have Mason Graham falling down the board a little bit to number 10 overall. And the reason for that is actually has nothing to do so much with Mason Graham as just a reflection of the depth of this year's draft class. But as you said, he is one of the top players in this class. The production, the intangibles, the size, the agility, the strength. He really is the best all-around defensive tackle in a draft class that, in my opinion, is the strongest positional group of this entire draft class. Again, defensive line. So I think that Mason Graham is one of the safest players in this class, and is going to wind up again being a future Pro Bowl possibility.
We've been following Colston Loveland since he enrolled at Michigan, made a splash early in his career when they went on that huge CFP run. He's a guy who has a little bit of a different skill set than the physical tight end. Kind of looks sometimes more like a wide receiver. How do you see him transitioning to the next level?
Again, I mentioned Sam Laporta before, in a Rob Gronkowski comparison there with Tyler Warren. To me, when you look at Colston Loveland, he is a little bit more of that Laporta or George Kittle type in that, as you said, he has some ability to flex outside as almost a slot wide receiver. I just think that translates very well to today's era of pass-happy football in the NFL. Tyler Warren is a player that I've had projected to go number 14 overall to the Indianapolis Colts in several versions of the mock draft process. I think that he would be an absolute slam dunk there, similar in some ways to a former Indianapolis Colts star, Dallas Carter.
Will also be interesting to see what happens with Michigan cornerback Will Johnson, a guy who has been highly thought of but sat out the end of the year. Be interesting to see how teams kind of play that into their draft selections. Medical concerns, Rob, are always there as well. Derek Harmon of Oregon apparently has some. This is news that's been surfacing over the last couple of days. What do we know there? How could it potentially affect his draft stock?
I don't think that it is going to affect his draft stock that much. I think that this is much ado about nothing. I was actually at the University of Oregon Pro Day, watched Derek Harmon compete through all of those drills. He was a little bit heavier than he was at the combine. That to me is a little bit of a concern. But in terms of the explosiveness, the power, the agility, I've been fortunate to work in the Pac-12 for years, and they had an award there, the Morris Trophy, as the best offensive and defensive lineman in the conference. Derek Harmon would have been the Morris Trophy award winner this past season had that award still existed. And I think that he is an absolute train wrecker at the defensive tackle position. To me, he should be a top 20 selection. If the medical concerns are legitimate, NFL teams feel that way, then he could take a small tumble, but I have a hard time imagining any scenario in which a player as disruptive as Derek Harmon does not a first-round pick.
Do you sense an NFL team maybe late in that first round that would be a good landing spot for Harmon?
Well, I've been plugging him into the San Francisco 49ers at number 11 overall. That's just how highly I view Derek Harmon. And again, just recognizing the need that the San Francisco 49ers have. I also think another group of teams that play that physical brand of football, the Seattle Seahawks at number 18 overall would make some sense. And then certainly the Pittsburgh Steelers 21, the Baltimore Ravens a little bit later in the draft. Again, those are teams that always prioritize physicality, and they don't get much more physical than big Derek Harmon.
All right, Rob, last year Ohio State sent a much smaller number of players than they typically do to the draft room. This year, that's not the case. They come off the national championship, and Ohio State has 8 players ranked among your top 50 overall NFL prospects. Who among that group, that very large group, kind of intrigues you and why?
Well, as you said, only 4 players drafted from the Ohio State Buckeyes a year ago. I think that Ohio State is going to lead all of college football in the number of players drafted this year. I think we're talking about at least a healthy baker's dozen for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Look, I think that if you're going to be talking about Ohio State, you got to start off at the top. Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver, reminds me so much of his former teammates, Jackson Smith and Jigba, just with how smooth of a route runner that he is. The way that he catches the football. I like the fact that he has played primarily in the inside at Ohio State. That just means that he is more physical in the running game and has the savviness to be able to get open against all the different man end zone principles he's going to be facing at the NFL level. But he also has size and speed to be able to play outside as well. So to me, he is the safest of this wide receiver class and the leader of the Ohio State Buckeyes team that, again, I expect to be mentioned many, many times over the course of the 3 days of the draft.
There's a lot of conversation about this Ohio State team maybe setting the all-time modern record, tying Georgia from a couple of years ago with maybe 15, perhaps even more picks than that. All right, Rob, let's finish with guys who probably won't go in the first round, and we see these guys every single year, but in their first year in the NFL can make a big-time impact. Which Big Ten prospect that's unlikely to be a first-day selection do you think is underrated and could have an instant impact for whatever team drafts him?
Well, there's actually a couple of guys that jump out to me. I'm going to start off the conversation with Nebraska's Ty Robinson. He is one of my favorite players in this entire draft class. 6'5", 288 pounds, gets his hands up in passing lanes. Also can be a devastating lead blocker as a fullback. I mentioned some of those clubs before that have always prioritized physicality: San Francisco, Seattle, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, the Green Bay Packers. To me, all would be a terrific fit for big number 9 from Nebraska.
Rob Rang, FoxSports.com NFL draft analyst, fueled by caffeine for at least another day or so, and then they can all rest. Rob, we appreciate the time and all the insight coming up with the draft starting on Thursday night.
Thanks so much for having me.
To be joined by Ducks head coach Dan Lanning ahead of this weekend's spring game. Hey, Coach, thanks for joining us. And why don't we start there? Because so many different places, different approaches to what the spring game is and isn't. What will yours look like from a format and physicality standpoint?
Yeah, we're going to play football. We'll play tackle football. I think that's just something that's really important. I don't think that every place has what we're able to create here. We'll have something close to a game day atmosphere with a lot of our fans there in the stands. And I think that's really important for our players to create that opportunity where live bullets are firing and you get a chance to really play ball. We won't be live on our quarterback. But outside of that, we're going to play a real football game, real 2-minute scenarios in a 4-quarter game.
How much conversation was there about that with you and your staff? Why is it so important for you to put these guys in that kind of situation at the end of spring ball?
There really wasn't a conversation. It's something we knew we wanted to do. We've had a spring game every single year since we've been here. I think it's a great opportunity for guys to get that chance to compete, and coaches evaluate guys in those situations. We have a bunch of talented players, and we need to take advantage of every opportunity we can to get on the field.
You mentioned the quarterbacks will hopefully stay clean this weekend. Where's that competition stand? Obviously, the two guys that everybody talking about, Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, but other guys in that room as well will, I'm assuming, get some run this weekend.
Yeah, you're going to see all of our quarterbacks, and they've all done a phenomenal job this spring. Austin, Dante, you'll see KJ, Luke Moga, Brock Thomas. There's been some really competitive periods in practice, and those guys are taking advantage of it. So we just want to see them go out there and operate clean, protect the ball, take advantage of opportunities when they have that chance, and throw the ball down the field when we get an opportunity as well.
What's jumped out as you've watched the quarterback room throughout spring ball?
Just the confidence building, right? Confidence building. I think experience is the great equalizer at quarterback, and it's probably more important there. It's easy to talk through a play on a diagram or on film. It's a little bit different when there's live rushers coming at you, and those guys have handled it really well this spring. Coach Stein and offensive staff have really challenged them from the amount of install that they can handle and the freedom that our quarterback has to make checks and get us in the right place.
Jordan James did so many things more than just running the football, but that room does return some experience, Noah among others. What have you seen from the running back group, and how deep do you think you'll be in that room this season?
Yeah, it's a good group. It's a really good group. Noah's the guy returning probably with the most experience. He's a guy that we trust back there. Has done an unbelievable job in special teams, and was really coming back from an injury this past season. So excited to see what year he will have. And then we have some new faces in there as well, some young faces, and I think it's a group that can compete to make a lot of impact plays for us this season.
Out wide, Evan Stewart seems to be like a guy who is ready to have a massive breakout year. Obviously, those of us in this league, in your area, know what he can do. Perhaps a guy that takes the national stage this year. What's the next step for him? Who else can help him on the edges?
Yeah, I mean, it's a talented room, and there's a lot of guys in there that can help. Evan, certainly we're poised for him to have a great season this year, was a dynamic player for us this past year. And I think just another year of experience, another year in the system is really going to help him. We have some new faces and some old faces, brought in Malik Benson, but we also have some guys like Kyler Casper, Justice Lowe, Gary Bryant that have been here, and then some new faces, as well with Jeremiah McClellan, Corian, and Cooper Perry, a lot of guys. I'm probably doing it a service because there's a lot of guys I think that can make plays in that room that have been able to help us. Dylan Gresham's had a great spring as well. So it's going to be fun for us to see that game day environment and who steps up.
You've had a lot of good wide receivers. What makes Evan specifically special?
Yeah, I think the ability to adjust the ball, catch the ball in tough locations, I think that's one of his special traits, is catch radius and how he's able to frame it.
Dan, you have one starter, I believe, full-time starter back from last year's O-line. It was such a position of strength. Joe Moore Award finalist. You attacked the portal to try to fill some of that void with guys who have a lot of experience at this level. How has that played out through spring ball and kind of building that offensive line chemistry?
Yeah, I just got done in a team meeting showing some clips of our O-line moving the defensive line from practice yesterday. So, the chemistry is something that's always a process. That's got to continue to come along. That doesn't happen overnight. But we have talent in that group. And we have some guys that had some good experience last year, in roles coming off the bench as well. So I'm excited to see what we got there. But definitely pleased with the guys that we were able to add to our team and see what they do.
Lose some production and experience up front defensively on that line. But I know with injuries last year, specifically to Jordan, it gave guys like Mateo Uyunglele a chance to show flashes of maybe the potential to be one of the best defensive players, certainly one of the best rushers in this country. How much better do you think Mateo can be with a full run this year, knowing that he has the chance to be one of the guys on your defense?
Yeah, he's been one of the guys, right? Him and Tatum are really bookend guys for us that have done unbelievable jobs. But this is definitely an opportunity for him to step up in a leadership role, his role grow even more. If he makes the same steps and advances that he did this past season, he's going to have an opportunity to be an unbelievable player and one of the guys that we remember for a long time as an Oregon Duck.
On the back seven, you appear to be deep, but it seems like it will be a different look with some new faces, especially in the secondary. How comfortable are you right now with where that defensive backfield stands?
Well, I'm comfortable at this point in spring. We still got a lot of growth by the time we get to our first game. Again, I think the group looks different. We've got a longer group, a group of great size and athleticism. We, as coaches, probably have to vary a little bit more of what we do to give them the opportunity to learn. We had an experienced group last year who was able to handle a lot of volume. We'll probably trim the volume back a little bit this season and make sure that we're able to let these guys execute at a high level. But a good, talented group that just needs that experience.
Dan, I mentioned the portal that you did work in offensive line, other positions, but you had a phenomenal haul in the traditional recruiting window. Obviously, some of those guys like to early enroll. How many early enrolled? And among those guys that maybe did, has anybody kind of jumped out as being a player that could potentially be an impact player for you this fall?
Yeah, I rarely take this opportunity to point out guys that have done, a great job as freshmen because it's still early, right? There's still time to see. And that being said, I'm really excited about the group we got. Basically, every one of our players on our team is here, excluding 3 guys that'll be coming in the summer. So we were able to get a lot of great work with them this spring. And I do think there'll be some freshmen that are making a big impact for us early this year.
Dan, I want to finish here with a schedule question because, honestly, despite some research, I have no idea how this actually works. You have 2 of the longest road trips possible, right? You go to Penn State, you go to Rutgers, but in the final 6 weeks of the season, I think you'll only leave the Western time zone once. So I'm curious, when it comes to scheduling, I know the conference is in charge of it. How much of it is a give and take between you, your AD, Rob Mullins, and the conference to try to make it as equitable for everyone as possible?
I've really learned to focus on what I can control, and that's not one of those things that I necessarily control. The Big Ten's been great to us, and some of the challenges that come with travel is something that's going to build and prepare your team for the future. So excited wherever they put us, put the ball down in the parking lot. Doesn't really matter to us. It's a great opportunity for us to develop, and then we'll adapt as coaches.
That's perfect, and I can follow up with Rob a little bit more the next time I see him. Always a guy who's good for a good chat. Dan Lanning, really appreciate the input and the insight. Look forward to watching you guys on the field this coming Saturday.
Thank you, Rick. Have a great one.
Head Husker in from Lincoln. Matt, I want to start by following up on that. What does that mean in terms of what folks will see, format, physicality, what you hope to get out of Saturday?
Yeah, it's really going to be twofold. A lot of our established players, guys who played a lot of football, they'll participate in the Husker games, sort of Pro Bowl type activities in between each quarter, including some of the great players who ever played here. So it's a chance for fans to reconnect with Husker greats, some of our current guys that are established in their roles, and then we're going to have a bunch of guys that are fighting to either move up the depth chart, establish a role, maybe make the 105. Those guys are going to play. We're going to tackle. We're going to play football and get 4 quarters of good old-fashioned Husker football.
Matt, the change away from the traditional spring game, not unique to your program. We're seeing it a lot of different places. I'm curious, though, the changes that we've seen in college football, the length of the season, if you get to where you want to be, how have all those affected the way you prepare for spring ball overall, not just the change with the spring game itself?
We've established sort of a kind of an old school approach because we didn't play 16 games. We made it to a bowl game, which was wonderful for us. We limited 1 week of kind of what we do, but we still believe in 8 weeks of off season. 5 weeks of a spring ball, all 15 practices. I think these guys are in an age where they need to develop and they need to play. I think if you're Ohio State and some of those teams that have played 14, 15, 16 games, maybe you need a little more rest, but we're not at that spot yet. We're chasing that, and so we put in a hard off season, and I think we're a lot better for it.
Matt, let's start offensively. Dana's impact was, I think, pretty obvious and immediate when he stepped in. How have you seen that impact maybe manifest itself even further during almost a full spring?
Well, I think for us, it's been good to see, just the development, just the familiarity Dana has now with kind of what he wants to do. It's a misnomer to think it's the air raid. I mean, we are 2 tight end offense, 3 receiver offense. We're going to do a little bit of everything. We want to get our guys ready for the NFL. And, we think we have a generational talent in Dylan. And we've got tremendous receivers, great backs. Emmett Johnson returns as the tailback. Ja'Cory Barney had a tremendous year for us last year. So we've got a lot of guys who played a lot of football, big, powerful offensive line. So I think it's been really good. It's been simple. We're not game planning anything. We're just kind of getting the basics down for who we want to be. But I think we're going to play power football with the ability to be explosive.
Matt, what is the next step for your quarterback, Dylan Raiola?
Honestly, I think he's made it. I think when you look at great quarterbacks though on the field, I think he's made a big step in the offseason, I should say. Just his development, his mindset, just his growth. I've been really proud. And the next step is taking the ball at the end of the game, sometimes even against insurmountable odds, and going down and winning the game. Throwing touchdowns in the red zone in tight windows. It's not making the easy play; it's making the tough plays. And so he's never shied away from that. He's made a ton of big plays. But we're gonna be in some tough games down the stretch, and we have to be able to hand the ball to Dylan. He takes his offense out there, and they go win the game.
And he'll hand the ball to a deep running back room led by Emmett Johnson, who you just mentioned. What do you expect and need from Emmett this year? And what about the other guys in that room? Hearing a lot of buzz about the redshirt sophomore Quentin Ives, among others.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Emmett, I've had a lot of backs at the college level who've gone on into to the next level, to the pros. And I think the thing that has ensured them having a long career is the ability to be able to play on rundowns and pass downs. And Emmett's a guy who can run the ball from the eye, from the gun. He can make all the runs. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can protect. He's truly like a every phase player. Quentin Ives, a little bit bigger at 210 pounds, elite speed, and really the same versatility. So behind him, you have some guys, Mekhi Nelson, Kenneth Williams, who we're really excited about. So we have to continue to build the depth, but certainly Emmett, I think, is going to be one of the better players in the conference.
You mentioned that you like the wide receiver room. Dana certainly does. He singled out Cortez Mills, Isaiah Mosey as two young guys who have the ability to be impact players right away. How quickly do you think they can help you?
Well, they'll be in the rotation. As I said, Ja'Cory comes back after a great year last year. We add in, Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter in the portal, bring in two really talented young players in Cortez and Isaiah. And I think the cool thing about them is they can move all over the field. I mean, Isaiah, he's the son of a coach. He can play inside, outside, play tailback if we need him. It reminds me of DJ Moore when I had DJ in the NFL. And I think those guys, they love football. They'll be ready to go.
Up front, you return a pretty big chunk of that O-line that was a big piece last year. And I know you said really good things about them throughout the course of the spring, being one of your better units. What do you like about that group?
Well, I mean, we're just big and strong now. I mean, everyone wants to rush and try to find a quick fix on the O-line. And, sometimes you can do some of those things, but there's nothing better than just getting a bunch of tough guys in here and having them eat weights and grow, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you got a room that you love. And what's been unique about the spring is we have 4 players who've started multiple games. Gunnar Gatula started at left tackle for us all last year. Turner Corcoran and Teddy have started at left tackle for us for multiple years. Henry Lutovsky started for us all last year. All those guys have been injured now this spring, and so it's been men like Justin Evans who made the move to center, who I think is going to be really fantastic. Left tackle. Both Elijah Pritchett, Grant Seagrin, a young player here that's growing in the program. So we're excited. Rocco Spindler came over from Notre Dame. Jason Machakchak's the young guy for us. And Tyler Canuck has really had a great spring at right tackle. So we feel like we're going to go into the year 8, 9, 10, 11 deep, and with also some good young players who in a year will really grow. So to win in the Big Ten, you better win up front.
Now, Matt, I think we're about of the same vintage, so isn't it kind of unfair? You look at these young guys and you want them to put on 15 or 20 pounds, but you want it to be good weight, and they can put on 15 or 20 pounds of good weight by doing the right things. I got to be honest, I think if you and I try to put on 15 or 20 pounds, it's not going to be exactly that kind of weight.
Yeah, you have to be careful in this building walking around. I mean, we've got I don't think you can walk 8 feet without like a quesadilla or a protein bar in front of you somewhere. So one thing about the University of Nebraska, we put our money into player development. We probably have the finest cafeteria run by Flick that I've ever seen. And so, I try to make sure I coffee and go for a walk every day so that I can be active on the sidelines.
I hear you, my man, and that strength and conditioning program, unbelievable as well. Defensively, John Butler takes over. It's a unit that's played pretty well over the last couple of years. I know consistency is obviously the key when you're in this league against the offenses that you have to face. But from a schematic standpoint, how much difference will we see in comparison to what we saw the last couple of years?
I think year 1 to year 2, we made a lot of really big changes, schematically. We were, less 3-3-5 and a little bit more, multiple. I think this year we'll continue to do that. We've watched a lot of these players that we've recruited grow. We've watched them develop. We like to refer to guys like that sometimes as chess pieces. And we don't want to just play, 11 guys. We want to get a bunch of guys on the field. So, we're going to continue to be multiple in what we do. We have to get guys ready for the NFL. And so if they come here and just play quarters, play zone coverage, we're not doing them any favors. So we're going to be aggressive. We're going to play man. We're going to play zone. We're going to be in a 4-3, 3-4, 3-3. We believe in that. We believe in attacking on defense, and we believe in turning our players loose. And so John's done a great job so far.
Attacking and getting guys ready for the NFL. 2 guys getting ready now for the NFL. Nash Upmaker, Ty Robinson. They were such positions of strength up on that D-line last year from both production and leadership standpoints. What returning players can kind of take over, maybe not necessarily just on the D-line, but in terms of production and leadership roles in 2025?
Well, I think defensively, I think we talk about leadership. You got to go to the back end. Marquise Buford, who's played a ton of football, Deshaun Singleton, Malcolm Hartzog. Those guys are, multiple year starters. You go to the second level, you've got Javen Wright, you got Vincent Shavers as a freshman who, guys follow. But I also always believe it starts up front. And if you can't knock people back at the point of attack, you're going to struggle. Riley Van Poppel, to me, has had an amazing spring, as has Cam Lenhart, Elijah Judy, Keona Davis. Except for Elijah, they're all younger players, but they're really good players. And they've put the work in. I think they'll be an excellent group, and we have a bunch of other guys we like that we're going to play. So we believe in playing lots of guys on the defensive line. We've got good leadership on defense, but your true heart and soul of your defense, to me, comes from the ability to stop the run and get after the quarterback. And we need those D linemen to do it, and they will.
Matt, I want to finish with the naming of Phil Snow as the official associate head coach. I know you guys have worked together a lot of different places, a lot of different levels. What will his role be? What does he mean to this staff as a whole?
Well, I think he's a football conscience. He's somebody that really doesn't care what you think. So he's going to tell you when he thinks something is wrong. He's someone that you can go to when you need advice. And what I find is I find a ton of players going to him. I mean, he's taking the guys that maybe aren't getting as much reps and doing extra work with them, developing them in the back end, working with some of the guys that are getting a ton of reps. He's seen everything. And sometimes when we talk about defensive football, we talk a lot about X's and O's. But to me, it's still always going to come down to not the what, but the how. Like, how are we running those plays? How are we practicing? How are we scripting? How are we getting off blocks and tackling? And Phil, I mean, he's taught me pretty much everything I know about football. I was his GA. He was my DC for 12 years. So to be honored to have him back here is amazing. And on a personal note, I know that at any time, no matter what situation comes across my desk, I can walk 3 doors down and get his perspective. And it's always a great one.
Especially in this day and age, the stress that comes with being a college football head coach never really quiets down, even in the offseason. Matt Rhule, truly appreciate the time. Really look forward to watching you and the Huskers with the Husker games coming up this weekend.
Thank you very much.
End of the year Big Ten Women's Tennis Awards just released, and it is a clean sweep for the Michigan Wolverines. Julia Fliegner, your Player of the Year. Ronnie Bernstein is your Coach of the Year. Wolverines win the Freshman of the Year honor as well. Time to take a look at the big board, focusing on weekend series inside Big Ten baseball. Yes, we do have an important non-conference series, Oregon 16 in the country at home against Oregon State. Other key series involve Indiana at Iowa, UCLA at home against Penn State, and it's always worth a watch when Michigan and Michigan State play in any sport. That is no exception this weekend when they meet in baseball in Ann Arbor. Michael Huff is back with us to break down all those series. Let's start the league-leading Hawkeyes taking on Indiana. On paper, Iowa is favored to win at least 2, if not sweep this series. In reality, anytime you face this Indiana lineup, you got to deal with Devin Taylor, program leader all-time in home runs, and a 1 through 9 lineup that when it gets hot can be really tough to keep off the base paths.
Yeah, when you think about these two clubs, you think about the bats. Iowa right now first in the Big Ten in batting average. Indiana number 2. You talked about Devin Taylor. This junior is just raking from the left side. But, oh, yeah, you got Corbin Dickerson, who's leading the Big Ten in RBIs. And you got this freshman Jake Hanley at first base that's hitting a cool 350 and almost 10 home runs. So it's going to be very fun to see what happens with the bats and which club can Iowa, the consistency, Indiana, the long ball, who's going to come out on top. But we all know Iowa right now is living on their arms. First in the Big Ten in ERA, where Indiana, unfortunately, is around 12th. Now, Indiana, Cole Gilly, great Friday starter. They don't quite have the depth of Iowa. So for Rick Heller, it's really going to be important to say, yeah, we're taking 2 out of 3. We're protecting our turf. But if I can sweep, I start getting into those potential national rankings.
At home, where Iowa has been really good this year, those pitchers have been nearly unhittable. Indiana will try to do what very few teams have done against the Hawkeye pitching staff this year in Iowa City. Meanwhile, it will not be an easy weekend series for Penn State because you have to travel out to UCLA. Now, give the Nittany Lions a ton of credit. They have exceeded almost everyone's expectations this year, especially offensively. But to me, this is a big ask to try to go out to LA and win this series.
It's going to be very challenging to win the series. Mike Gambino, what a great job in only his second year. And we mentioned earlier in the show, Rick Heller probably sitting right now as a number 1 person in the balloting for Coach of the Year, knowing that Iowa is not a top 6 preseason pick. But you know what? Mike Gambino right now, 25-14. They just knocked off on Tuesday a 14th ranked West Virginia. And this is a club that we saw what they did last year in the Big Ten tournament. They've got to be feeling really good about themselves. And if I can go out and I can go to UCLA and I can win one and maybe sneak that second one, now I have that confidence of not only am I in the Big Ten tournament feeling really good about myself, I'm not putting myself in that upper echelon, those top 6 teams that hopefully I can build on going forward.
And after a tough weekend series against Oregon for UCLA, bit of home cooking, trying to feel a little bit better about yourself as you do close in on this final month of the regular season. Michigan State. Wolverines were cooking, and then they ran into Iowa last week, got swept. Michigan State, meanwhile, despite a kind of odd non-conference loss earlier this week, has won 5 straight in conference play, but as is always the case, these two teams play each other. You take all that stuff, you crumple it up, you throw in this trash can down here, and let them have at it in Ann Arbor.
Well, and this is that great rivalry. And what's even more exciting is right now we're sitting at 8th or 9th and 10th in the standings. So there is so much on the line to think about how am I going to position myself going into the tournament. Can I win this series, take 2 out of 3, and have that tiebreaker against a team I might be tied with at that 12th spot? So now I'm in and they're out. And like you said, it was so heartbreaking for Tracy Smith. You're playing the best team in the Big Ten, and every one of those 3 games this last weekend, they felt like they were going to win, and Iowa somehow found a way to come back.
Though, when you're a team like Iowa and everything seems to be going your way, when you play a 3-game series like that, you just find a way to win each game.
And what's so cool about Iowa, and again, what they're doing this year as a team, number 1 in batting average as a team, you don't have that first-round, second-round pick. You don't have that person with 15, 14 home runs. They just all somehow get hits and pick each other up.
Trust me, Michigan saw it last weekend. That's why they got swept. Now they have a chance to get back at it against their arch rivals from their own state. How about Oregon State, Oregon? Now, this is a really weird setup. They'll play 3 this weekend in Eugene, and then they go out to Corvallis after a day off on Monday to play a 4th game. Not part of the series, but a 4th consecutive game. And what a chance for the Ducks here against the number 3 team in the country.
Number 3. So you have a top 5, a top 20 team. So exciting. Now, for Oregon State, they're 4-1 against Big Ten teams. One of the teams they lost to, Minnesota. Ohio State almost beat them. They've only lost 1 series all year. That was to Nebraska, a Big Ten team. So now they're going to go play Oregon. They're going to play Iowa later in this summer, this spring. And Oregon has this great chance. You just took 2 out of 3 from UCLA, who is ranked ahead of you in the national rankings. You have a chance now at home to take 2 out of 3, see what you can do, and it's going to be very exciting to see what happens with these two.
I got to tell you, though, Iowa, monster Oregon State fans this weekend, because not only could you hand some more losses to Oregon, but then Oregon State would up its own RPI, and with Iowa playing Oregon State later in the year, that helped their chances at that large bid if they don't get the auto. I was told there would be no math. For Mike Huff and all of our guests, I'm Rick Pizzo. That wraps up this edition of Big Ten Today. Hope to see you again Thursday.